One of the things that's hard about being a guy is that sometimes you go to the store and you buy a bunch of t-shirts and you don't want to try them on. You're like, these t-shirts should fit. They're t-shirts. But then you bring them home and they look like a lampshade. It's like, why am I wearing a top skirt? This is ridiculous. What about a shirt that accentuates the cool stuff? Chest and your arms and how strong you are. You know what I mean? That's what True Classic's all about, okay? So check this out. Not only do they have t-shirts, but they've got long sleeves, Henleys, fleece hoodies, jeans, button-ups, joggers, and more. And here's the great thing. True Classic are meant to fit men. They're meant to fit you properly, which I love. So here's what you need to do. You need to bundle up for spring. Get ready. And what I mean by bundle up is go on a little shopping adventure. TrueClassic.com/dangle to save. That's TrueClassic.com/dangle. Get your spring wardrobe up to date and feel good doing it too. Again, TrueClassic.com/dangle.
This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
Welcome to another episode of Agent Provocateur. Adam, how are you?
I'm great, Allan. I'm still recovering from all the trade deadline stuff. How about you? What's going on?
Here, there, and everywhere. Did some travel back in LA right now. We have a really special guest today.
I'm so excited for this.
And, we started 4 seasons ago with Agent Provocateur, where we mostly had guests on. And we sort of evolved into doing a lot of one-on-one with you and I together, discussing several hot topics and also topics that are very near and dear to our hearts. And I miss having guests on, and think that there's several people out there that I've talked to in the recent past who were more than willing to come on and tell some stories and share insight, analysis, and fascinating, high-profile people in the hockey world. And we have one of those people today. So our guest, affectionately known as the Senator. He's a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame and Order of Canada. He broke into the NHL in 1966-67, actually played 2 NHL games in the pre-expansion Original Six era. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP in 1969, the first defenseman to ever win the Conn Smythe. He won 8 Stanley Cups as a player, 2 as a general manager in the NHL. He starred for Team Canada in the 1972 Summit Series, and he was named to the 100 greatest players of all time. Let's give a big welcome to the Senator, Serge Savard. And here we are with the Senator, Serge Savard, Order of Canada, Hockey Hall of Fame, voted one of the top 100 players in NHL history. Welcome, Serge, to Agent Provocateur.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be there.
You have no idea what an honor it is for me to have you here as a guest, having grown up in Montreal and watched you play during a good part of your career. You started in the NHL. You played your first 2 games when it was still the Original Six, before expansion.
Yeah, well, I start my first year pro. I start in Houston. Houston was the farm team. The Apollos was the farm team of the Montreal Canadiens, and I was called up for 2 games. That's why I know when I retired, they told me I was the last guy to retire that played with the Original Six.
Wow.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's incredible. So recently at the Four Nations, the Team Canada 72 was honored by the NHL Alumni Association for congratulations on that. In the Summit Series in 72, you played in all 4 of the winning games and the game that ended in a tie. You did not play in any games that Team Canada lost, and I believe you broke your leg in the middle of the tournament.
Well, didn't really. I had a hairline fracture. With the broken leg, I don't think I could have come back. We had 2 weeks in between the series. We went in Sweden for a week. That's why I could rejoin the team in Russia. I got hurt in Winnipeg the next morning after the tie game in Winnipeg. The slap shot from Red Berenson in front of the net during the workout. I was very lucky, I was the only guy undefeated, but they didn't dress me the first game. I don't think it would make a big difference in the first game. But we were so sure to win that series. Even our coach, Harrison, then he went in front of the team the night before and he says, everybody will play. We were 37. He says, everybody will play. And the first game probably made his biggest mistake. He dressed only 5 defensemen. And of course, in the middle of the game, those guys were still skating pretty fast and were probably in better shape than as a group as we were. So after losing the first game, I was dressed the second game in Toronto that we won. And we tied in Winnipeg, and I got hurt the next morning, so I couldn't play the losing game in Vancouver. And the very first game in Moscow, Harry came to me and he says, "Can you play?" I said, "Sure, I can play. I don't think I'm 100%, but I can play." I made a mistake. I should never have mentioned that. And he didn't dress me the first game. That's how I became undefeated. It's just luck.
Wow. Wow. So I was at the first game in Montreal in September 1972. I won't tell you how old I was because I'd embarrass myself. I was 7 years old. My father brought me to the game, and I remember the atmosphere. And I remember the prime minister coming out on the ice and dropping the puck. And it was the first time I had ever seen the prime minister live. I remember so much about that first game. What were you thinking? Team Canada scores 2 goals real quick. The route is on. Everyone's saying or thinking or feeling this is going to go to 10. It's going to be 10-0. These guys can't play on the ice with us. And here we are going into the third period behind, and the final score is 7-3. What were you thinking watching that game unfold?
Well, after the first 2 goals, that's what we expect. Everybody was telling us that you guys won't lose a game. All the press in general thought that, that was really the first time that those guys were facing professionals, and people could not see the professional having a tough fight against those guys. But those guys were really professional, and they prepare almost a year for that series. And we prepare a couple weeks, 4 weeks before that series. And, it's I played against them in juniors, but still, we were juniors. We knew how good they were. But what's the difference between that caliber and the National Hockey League? To say there's no way. But that was the merger. That was the year of the merger. Not the merger, but the World Hockey Association. And
Yep.
we couldn't use Bobby Hall, and Bobby Orr was injured. If we had Bobby O at 100%, it's probably a different series, probably. And hockey in those days, hockey was really Canada and USSR. We had no other player in the National Hockey League, and the American were just starting to produce players. We had only a few American players. Now there's 32% of American in the league, and I think the Canadian around 42, 43, and it's just a matter of time it's going to go the other way. We're 400 million against 40 million, and there's some great program in the United States. So hockey's international now compared to 1972. That's why that series meant so much at that time and meant so much for the people of my age. You didn't want to tell your age, but in 72, I was 26. So if you were laughing, I was 26 years old. I was born in 46. And for me, I've been on 10 Stanley Cup, 8 as a player and 2 as a manager. And for me, the greatest event in my career is Team Canada 72. I don't think at that time an athlete can elevate himself so high emotionally that we did in 1972. And the series, just like the Four Nations, the series became politics. And we didn't want that. As a player, you don't want that. And the series, because of the president, few comments, the series became politics. Same thing. Same thing in 1972, 5 rows behind the net, you had Brezhnev. And when Trump started to talk about the 51st states, this thing became politics.
Yep.
And that's not what the player wants, but we got dragged into this. Same thing in 76, in 72, and same thing during the Four Nations. Because the Four Nations was just a tournament, just to replace the All-Star game. What if the Canada is not involved in the final? They could hardly sell the tickets 2 weeks before.
100%. And the Four Nations took on a life of its own because of the setting between what's going on politically, Canada and the U.S. What do you remember about Game 8, the 8th game, the final game of the series in Moscow, in Luzhniki Arena? I was sitting in my second grade class. The teacher wheeled in a TV, black and white, with rabbit ears coming out of the TV, grainy picture, and we all huddled around and watched that game. And I have to tell you, Serge, about once a year, I pull out the 8th game that I have on video and I play it again. And I've probably watched that last game, probably 30, 40 times. I know the periods, I know the plays, and there isn't a time I don't watch the end of that game and I'm not in tears. It brings me back to being back in my second grade class, watching it with all my schoolmates back then. That's what's in here, that we were part of it.
Gretzky told me he watched the series 5, 6 times. He says every year you watch that series. But in those days, the communication was zero compared to today. The only way we could communicate in those days was by telegram, and we had hundreds of thousands of telegrams coming from Canada, and we put them against the wall. We had 2 rooms full of that, but we didn't know that the country was stand still. The game started at 12 o'clock Montreal time, 9 o'clock Vancouver time in the morning. And we were 22 million people in 1972, and 18 million people were watching that game. That's the whole country was a standstill. And I had people like you telling me I was at school. They brought the television sets in the classroom, or kids didn't go to school. Like Gretzky says, didn't go to school. His father didn't know. We did not know that back then in Moscow. For us, me personally, I was nervous before a game, but as soon as the game starts, as soon as I'm involved in the game, I'm not nervous. And we didn't think about the final score, but if the game would end up as a tie, the Russians were going to win that series.
By
And
goals, by goals.
by goals, one guy
Yep.
came behind our bench a couple of minutes before the end and they say, if the game stays tied, we win. One Russian guy came to say that. And, we didn't know what was going on. And obviously, at the end of the day, the good guy won.
It was the third period was chaos. The goal judge wouldn't turn the light on when Canada scored. Allan Eagleson almost got dragged away by the Russian militia and ended the game behind your bench, standing next to your coaches. Take us into that last 10 minutes of the game.
Well, when I saw this thing, my mind was in the game and what the hell's going on here? I did not know. I saw Peter Mahalowicz and those guys, and they grab him. And for me, I love hockey. I don't like violence in the game, and there's always a few incidents in the series or in the hockey games that people remember. And there was a movie about Team Canada '72, and 20% of it they refer to those incidents, and the same thing against the Four Nation. We got to remember about the 3 fights in 9 seconds before the game. That's not what I want to remember. To me, I know the people were all excited, but that's not part of the game. We're the only sports in the world that allow fighting in the game. But in 1972, we had a few bad incidents, including in the last game. And a lot of people are referring to that. But that series was more Paul Anderson, Yvan Cournoyer had a great series. Yvan Cournoyer was probably our best player, and Bobby Clark. Why Anderson had such a great series is because Ronnie Ellis and Bobby Clark had a great series. But we referring Bobby Clark because he gave a two-hander to the Russian players. And Kalamov, but that's the way Bobby Clark played in the National Hockey League. He did it to me. He did it to me. He did it to a lot of guys. He did it to me after '72. We were supposed to be friends.
Serge, I got to ask you about the beer and the steaks. There's an urban legend that when you guys went over to Moscow, there was supposed to be Canadian steaks and Canadian beer shipped over, and that the beer got somehow lost and that the steaks arrived, but only half, and they were cut in half. Is that true?
I don't know.
You don't know?
We never run out of beer. We never run out of steaks. But that people say we had calls in the middle of the night, but we have calls in the middle of the night here too. When if you leave your phone on, and whatever was done intentionally, I don't know. Those people were so poor; they lack of everything. If you have a pair of nylon socks for the maid, it was like Christmas for them.
Wow.
And is there people in the kitchen that stole steaks and stole beer? Of course. And we have the same thing here in our country. Because I used to own an hotel too. I know how things going. but we were in a communist country, and at that time it was like going to North Korea today.
Yep.
Russia was like that. We had 3,000 Canadians at that game in Russia, and usually there's no tourists. There was no tourists in that city. One of the reasons we won was that, but we were in that country, and for me, things were not that bad. yes, they might have steal a few
Okay.
steaks and a few beers, but things weren't that bad.
But you were still able to have a beer, which is good.
Well, we had our own chef. We brought our own chef, and everything came from the Canadian Embassy. I don't think we could get things overnight, but if we lack of steaks, it probably came a couple days later.
Got it.
But I don't blame anybody for stealing some things. No, I don't.
I want to transition. I've always found fascinating your transition from Hall of Fame player to management. And we just finished the GM meetings a few days ago here. When did you first start thinking about becoming a general manager?
It was in 1983. I retired in 1981 in Montreal, and I had no intention of coming back. I started to take a course to become I want to be a stockbroker, and I was already working in the firm in September, 81, and as you know, before the season, there's a waiver draft. Players team are protecting. I don't know if it works the same way today, but in those days they protect the players for the season, and they left me unprotected, of course, but they forgot to have me sign the retirement paper, so I was still available. Technically, and my friend John Ferguson, which was my close friend, he drafted me, but he didn't call me before he drafted me. And when he called me, I says, John, I just retired, and I have no intention of coming back. That was in September, and he kept calling me about every week, and at the end, every second day was calling me, you have to come, you have to come. I left Montreal because Montreal had to renew the team, and I was the oldest players. But in Winnipeg, they were all young players. Howard Chuck was a rookie.
Yep.
So after one game, him and Tom Watt called me at 2:00 in the morning. I think they lost 16-2 or in Minnesota that night.
Wow.
I forgot the score, but it was something like that. And he called me at 2:00 in the morning, and you have to come, and this and that. And my wife was beside me, and she says, if you decide to go, I'm ready in 24 hours.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. And I decided to join the team in December. That was in December. And I played a year and a half in Winnipeg. I really enjoyed those 2 years in Winnipeg. And I was going to play another year. And I was 37 years old. I got a call from Mr. Corey. He wanted to meet me, and I had 2 meetings with him, and I became I didn't have really. I was not prepared for that job. I was appointed general manager 2 weeks after the seasons in 1983. Yeah. In April '83, and I was scared. I was scared to death, and I came in Montreal, and I walk in Sam Pollock's office, which you probably knew that office was so big, and was nothing on my desk, nothing. So where do I start the first morning? I call it, and Donna Stewart, that you probably met.
Yeah.
She brought me the bylaw of the National Hockey League. It says, "Holy mackerel!" What? I didn't know where to start, and finally I decided I was very. I want to see the player's salary. So I told Donna, I said, bring me all the contracts. So that's how I start my first hour as a general manager, to find out that the guy that dominated the leagues for 5-6 years, Guy Lafleur was really the best players of the National Hockey League for 5 years, 5-6 years. And he was making $500,000. Was the highest paid of the team. $500,000 in 1993. Just try to compare us today. But the revenue, I was a manager for 12 years, but we didn't have any revenue compared to today. Like you're an agent, and you're at the other hand of the road. But if you look, for example, at the local TV rights, the French local TV rights, Radio Canada had it in Montreal for $100,000 a year, and the French TV rights right now is $1 million a game.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're talking about salary cap, and the Montreal can the team at that time when I was a manager. I've seen all the number. The maximum the team was making is between $3 and $5 million profit, and on that the team made me budget 6 playoff games. And today's revenue, and I don't see the numbers, but you're talking about the hundreds of millions of dollars profit with the revenue they have now.
Well, you came into Montreal as the new general manager in '83, and it only took you 3 years to win your first Stanley Cup as a GM. Once you got comfortable in the job, and I'm sure it didn't take you very long, how did you make the building of relationships with other general managers and come up with a philosophy on how you wanted to build your team?
Well, first of all, I had the few friends in the general manager that was not very hard to connect with those guys. Ronnie Caron was my friend, Lou Nanny, and I got to know everybody. I knew them. Cliff Fletcher was in Montreal when I first arrived in 1961. Yeah. So that was the easy part. For John Ferguson was one of my best friends, was the general manager, and you do business with the people you trust and your friends more than others. But as a manager, the manager was always the player. I managed as a player, and that's really helped me because anything happened to the team, I knew pretty well what was going on. And one day I had a problem on one team, or a players had a major problem. I didn't go over the coach, but I had a few meetings with players in my office, and I was talking as a player. And as today, you could go see, you could talk to former players, and they would tell you so. They would tell you the way I did operate, and the player was the manager, in 2 words, and it pays off. And I got to I knew that you have to build the team from the bottom. You have to build the team by the draft. You cannot build the team only with trades, and that's why when I won the cup in 1986, 3 years after I was appointed, I had 9 players for my first 2 drafts, including 4 free agents like Scrudlin, 4 free agents that I signed right after the draft. I had 9 of them on the roster with Patrick Roy, with Richer, with Claude Lemieux. I have 9 players on that team. So I think I did the right thing, and in today's, I think I could work it with the salary cap, but in today's salary cap, you have to build with the draft as well. If you don't bring 3-4 young players every year, you're in trouble. So you have to bring your young players to manage your cap. But I was saying that, but I never manage a team with salary cap. It's easy to say.
You pulled off one of the biggest shocks of the NHL draft by relatively early in your GM career by drafting this young, skinny kid, defenseman from Czechoslovakia at the time. And all of a sudden you mention his name and a lot of people don't know who he is. And out he comes from, I believe he was being hidden in the Canadiens dressing room or somewhere like that. And out he comes and puts on a jersey. Can you tell us about the story of drafting Peter Svoboda for Montreal?
Well, first of all, Peter Svoboda defected in Germany, and he was at the World Junior, and he was named the MVP of the World Junior. He was very well known, and to me, when my scouts start to talk to me about this guy, and we look at this guy very closely, and I had 2 first-round picks that year, and I says. I'm gonna draft him. You know, guys coming from communist country. I says I will draft him only if he's here in Montreal. So we did a great job by bringing him in Montreal without nobody notices. Nobody knew. I had the help of the government. I sent François Seigneur, sent 2 guys in Germany. He went through the back door of the custom with the help of the government, and we hide them at the Ritz-Carlton, and we pull him out just the day of the draft. We brought him in our office at the Forum. The draft was at the Montreal Forum.
Yeah.
And just before the draft, I asked Claude Mouton to, just before we announce him, I asked Claude Mouton to come down the stairs, but he got locked in, and I was waiting. I was looking around and I was waiting. He got locked in the corridor, and eventually he came in, and I says, "Holy Jesus!" He was good, weighing about 140 pounds. I look at this guy. What did we do here? And, I had the 5th pick and the 8th pick, and we pick him first, and then we pick Corson 8 that year.
Oh, good pick. Good pick.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your second cup as a general manager in '93. It was very similar to kind of the Stanley Cup run that you guys had in '71 as a player, where you certainly were not the favorites in '93 to win the cup, but something happened along the way when you got to the playoffs. Can you tell us about that year?
We had a good team. We had the best goalie to start with.
No question.
And what's really changed is, when I got Danfus for Corson from Edmonton, Danfus got close to 100 points. I had people don't remember that, but I had 4 guys with 80 points and more, between 80 and 100 points. I had 4 guys, so I had all the ingredients to win. And people say, "Oh, you were lucky." I was not lucky. We were the best team at that time, and we faced Quebec. Quebec was the best team we faced in the playoffs, and we lost the first 2 games, and we won the next 4. So we were a pretty good team, and we won 11 games in overtime, if you remember.
Yes.
Yep.
So when I look at the team like the Montreal Canadiens right now, they have great players. They had 4 or 5 really young players that will become very, very good down the road soon. But they don't have those 4 guys between 80 and 100 points yet. They're not there yet. They're playing. They're good. So I had that. I had that. I had those 4 guys. If you look at the lineups, yeah. So and also you cannot win if you don't become a team, and that's where the manager player, that was the players, knew very well. if you don't convince your best player to join the team. That's what happened to great teams like Toronto and Edmonton. They never won with the best player in the league because you couldn't convince those players to get into the mold. In the 70s, when we won the Cup, we had Steve Schott with 60 goals one year and Lemaire 40, and the other one 50, Lafleur on the other side. They joined the group. They came back. They played as a team. So as a manager, you have to convince your best players that you're not going to stand up and not coming back. You have to play like you have to join the group. That's the toughest part of it. And when you get that, you beat better teams.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
Well, that's exactly what I told you. You have to convince the best team. How can you convince Matthews to play to join the team? I think I can do that. I think I can do that. That's probably the part I did the best. One time, I've got to tell you something. In 1986, we won the Cup, but at the end of the season, we had problems. And then I had a meeting with my 6 defensemen. They were taking chance and they were getting cut. And I brought my 6 defensemen. That include Rick Green, a former, one of the best defensive defensemen of all time in the National Hockey League. And I got him in my office. I says, the next guy that crossed the other blue line is not dressing the next game. Nobody did, and we won the Cup.
Wow.
That's great. I love that.
Wow. Do you think Scotty in the 70s had the ability to get players to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Did you learn that from him?
Yeah. Scotty's the best coach ever. Maybe you won't hear that from everybody. I've seen some guys that came to me. They say, "Oh, this guy did that. Show me your ring. Show me your ring. Show me your ring." So the only thing I can say about Scotty Bowman, he think about hockey 24 hours a day, and he made me a better player. I was a better player because of this guy. And I couldn't ask for a better coach. And yes, we won in the 70s, 4 cups in a row. And we got great players. But we had a lot of crises also, and you had to manage them. And you put things together, and he brought us, and we were a team. It happened a couple times. We got beaten the first round in the 70s. One against Buffalo, one against the Rangers. And those 2 years, we weren't the team. We didn't play as a team. We weren't the team that we should have been.
But the year against the Rangers was the year that Ken Dryden wasn't there.
Yes.
Yes.
But he was there. He came back. He was there against Buffalo. And Buffalo was almost the best team of the league at that time. They got beat against the Flyers in the finals.
Yep.
And we know why.
So here you are in 93, you win the Cup, and it's just a reality of the business that every coach and every general manager at some point in time, they get hired for the job, and most likely at some point in time, they get fired from the job. And you'd started the season in, I believe it was 95, 96. 95. And the team got off to a bad start out of the gate. And in a rather shocking move, you and Jacques Demers were both let go at the time.
Yeah, well, we lost the first 4 games. That was 95. If you go back, we won the Cup in 93. It was not that long ago.
Right.
So I'm pretty proud of my record. And I got beaten in the final another year, 89. But that year, what really hurts me at that time, I went to see Mr. Corey 2 weeks before the season starts, and I told him I had a Stanley Cup team. I had a great lineup, and I said I may be a player away, but and if you remember that year, Florida, Miami ended up in the Stanley Cup Finals. So we they get rid of me. They brought new peoples there, and they start to make trades. They trade Patrick Roy. The Corson and Richer trade them because they were in the last part of their career, and I got better player for them. I got Danfus, and I got Muller, and they got them back. So they went backward, and they sent Mike Keane and the O-line, and they trade the character of the team. So Montreal became an ordinary team after that. And not because I was away, but that was let go. But I felt so bad when they start to trade players like that. And one night I was with my son, and they made a trade with St. Louis that night. What's his name? I forgot the name of the players. The good center from Buffalo and New York Islanders. At my age, I forgot the names. But anyhow, they traded to St. Louis, and they got Corson back. And I said, somebody's got to stop them. You know, they just, for me, they destroyed the team I built.
Yeah. Would that be Craig Conroy or Pierre Turgeon?
That was Pierre Turgeon.
Right.
So Pierre Turgeon, the night he scored he had 5 or 6 points the night they traded him after the game. He had 5 or 6 points that day. So
it was almost a feeling like the management of the Canadiens was being run by the media and the fans, and they were doing things that they thought would be popular, bringing back players who they thought were well known in the market and would be popular, and not thinking strategic on what it takes to win in the league at that time.
I don't know. I cannot say that. But one thing I can say, what I did when I was there, I was never influenced by the media to make a move. And I never made a move for myself. Let's say I'm going to build for the next 3 years to protect my job. I never did that. I built for the long run, and I was secure. I never went to Ronald Corey's office to change my contract. I was just happy in my job.
Wow. So after Pierre Gauthier was let go, Jeff Molson undertook a search for a new general manager. And one of the first things he did was he came to you and he asked you to act as his special advisor in running the GM search. Can you tell us how that happened and what that was like for you?
Well, of course, I said yes, and we started the search, and we interviewed 3-4 guys, and at the end of the day, after the second meeting with Bergevin, we stopped there, and we decided that everybody was agreed that the Bergevin was the best candidate for that job. But I still have his presentation here. He did everything the opposite of what he told me on his presentation.
Really?
Well, he built by the draft, and at the end, he had one player on his lineup in his last 7 drafts at the end here in Montreal. So I mean, all his third and fourth line were trades. If you can't produce your third and fourth line, you're in trouble. And And then you had Carey Price, and every time in Montreal they were going in the playoff, they say, well, we may have a chance if Carey Price can steal a game or two. When you're at that point and your goalie cannot score a goal, you need your goalie to steal a game. I couldn't believe the comments in those days. So for me, it was not a great time. And what they end up in the Stanley Cup Finals, the year they shouldn't have played, they shouldn't make the playoffs.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You know, I've had the very good fortune and blessing to be in the Canadiens dressing room, back in the Montreal Forum and in the Bell Center. And as a kid who grew up in Montreal, to see the legends on the wall and the saying from the famous poem, "To us of failing hands, we pass the torch, be it yours to hold high." It's really an incredible dressing room, and you can feel, if I can say this, the ghosts of the legends of the past who are no longer with us. And to me, one of the great events that happen when you go to a game in Montreal is bumping into the legends who played the game, including yourself and many of the other Canadian legends at the alumni room. Um, the
The
legends who
problem,
are
the problem, Alan. I think they left the goats in the other building.
well, they had the ceremony at the old building and the new building to try to bring the ghosts over.
It's the past. This is very important. I'm a Packers fan in football, and I visit the stadium many times, and the Hall of Fame that they have in their building is just in Green Bay is just unbelievable. You know, you have to keep your past alive, like the Yankees and the Montreal Canadiens, and you know the top two franchise in history, in the sports history, and you have to keep that alive. It's too bad Montreal had a museum in the Bell Center, and then they tear it down. So you just can't forget your past like this,
For sure.
you know. And it's like going into the Hall of Fame. If you have a chance to go to the Hall of Fame, you've seen what the sports is all about. And once a year, I'd like to go to a game in Toronto. The first game of the Montreal Canadiens. A friend of mine gave me his private box, and I auctioned the box at my tournament, and I lead a group and I bring them to the Hall of Fame with me, and sometimes with another Hall of Famer like Guy Lapointe or Yvan Cournoyer. And you should see the face of the people there when they go around the Hall of Fame with a couple Hall of Famer, and it's something special. That's why you have to make it a special visit when you go to the Bell Center or Yankee Stadium or anywhere else where they have a great past like the Montreal Canadiens.
Let's talk a little bit about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. Do you think the players who played the game are getting the necessary support and resources that they've earned from the time they played the game in retirement?
Well, there's players like me that had a pretty good success off the ice after my career. There's some horror stories of players that didn't have anything after their career and took their pension at 45 because you're allowed to take it at 45. And in those days, they were giving you $1,000 a year per year of service at the age of 45. So if you take it at 65, it's a lot more. But and this pension is not indexed. So you receive. I know some players that drew their pension at 45 because they had nothing else,
Right.
and today it's nothing. In my pension as a player, which I draw at 65, so I'm 79 now. It's the same pension that I had at 65, so it's worth half of it. So the National Hockey League and the Player Association have a program now, and they help those players. A guy like me gets an extra 20 grand, 25 grand a year before taxes, which is very helpful. And I hope the Player Association and the National Hockey League keep doing that till maybe the players of today probably won't have those needs. But the players that play the game in the 70s and even 80s still need a little bit of help.
When I see players from the 70s and 80s in the rinks, there's a lot of guys walking around. You can see they have hip issues, they have back issues, they have knee issues, they've had knee replacements, they've had hip replacements. There's teeth bridges that need to get redone, every 10 or 15 years. And they talked to me about how they felt they were lied to about their pensions at the time. They were being told, international hockey, you're not going to get paid for playing in these big tournaments, but all the money raised is going to your pension plan, and you guys are going to have the best pension plan in all professional sports. And then they get into retirement and they find out their pensions are not indexed to inflation. They find out that guys who played in the league for 10, 12, 15 years are getting $12,000 Canadian in their pension, and they feel like they were let down.
Well, I think you're right. If you go back to the biggest series, which started in '72, I don't think there was a dime going into the pension. But they're doing a better job now. But at that time, the National Hockey League was 100% of the players were Canadians, and the pension fund was in Canadian dollars, but the dollars also was $100, 110 at one point of time.
Yeah.
The value of the Canadian dollar. Now it's
Yes.
70 cents. It's 70 cents. So if you have a players now that plays in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s and live in the United States and get his pension in Canadian dollars, well, he's getting the bad treatment because he cannot survive with that kind of money. Those guys need help.
Yeah. And another issue that really sticks out to me is healthcare. If a player retires from the NHL and they want to go into the retired players' healthcare plan, it can cost them up to almost $40,000 US a year. For them and their families to be in that plan. And if they ever drop out of that plan, they can never get back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's here. I know you have that problem in the United States.
Yes.
In Canada, we have Medicare. In Canada, it's free for everybody, no matter the operation that you have. And if you have a team like Montreal, the doctor that all the doctors, Mulders, and all those guys in Montreal, they keeps seeing all the old timers, and we really have helps here in Montreal. Montreal is a model for that, and not only for the players, for your family. If you have a problem and you call Dr. Mulder, is retired now, but but they're still doing it at the general. They're still seeing the family of the former hockey players. If you have a problem, it could be solved. But it's not like that everywhere. It's not like that everywhere. The situation is very different in Canada than in United States. Medicare here is standard across Canada.
What do you feel about the game today as it's played today? Do you think it's I mean, there's you brought up a little while ago fighting, and that you're not a fan of fighting per se. There's a lot less fights today than certainly back in the era you played. What do you think of the quality of the game today?
Well, it's faster. The players, the athletes are bigger and faster. The problem that I see, we took the red line off, and I was one of as a manager in those days that promote that, because I thought that was the only thing left that we had to improve the games, because the owner did not want to build bigger rink. They didn't want to do the rink like the international hockey, which would be great right now because the game is very fast. The problem that I see now, there's not enough room on the ice. The game is so fast, and the guys cannot keep the puck more than 1 second. There's always somebody on the puck, and that's why it's so entertaining in the overtime, because when you play 3 against 3, and a lot of guys need more room, and that's why you get that Patrick Laney that score all his goal at the same spot during power plays. And to me, I don't know, a guy like Caulfield, I'm taking Montreal, for example, is having I don't think, it's hard for him to play 5-on-5, but he's outstanding on power play. So I don't know, in the future, maybe we'll have to play the game 4-on-4 because there's no more room. Maybe we start to play the last 5 minutes 4-on-4. Maybe we start slowly, because there's no room on the ice, and the players will get faster, the equipment will get better, and we get now, because of the red line. Could you imagine a winger, 220 pounds, that skate for 200 feet and hit the defenseman at the end? Guy Lafleur had to slow down in between the blue lines because of the pass.
Right.
Yet today they don't have to slow down. The best place to deflect the puck at the other blue line. That's the best play in hockey now. So hockey is getting better. There's no doubt. My worry, there's no more room on the ice.
Yeah, Adam.
Well, Serge, I think I'm curious about your thoughts on the development of young players today, because it has taken obviously a whole different thing. Obviously, they've got access to YouTube, so they can see highlights from players that you'd only be able to see on a Saturday night before or during Sports Center or something like that. There's also a lot of parents hiring personal coaches, and it's very specialized now in a way that perhaps it wasn't before. What are your thoughts on youth hockey development and the way that kids are being brought into the sport now versus the way it was before?
Well, first of all, before, we didn't produce hockey players in Vegas and in LA and in Florida. We produced players only where it was cold. And that's why my region, where I'm from, 400 miles northwest of Montreal, we had all kinds of players coming because in the league, because the winter was a month longer in those places than in Montreal. Was not that many players from the Montreal area. And then eventually everybody skates on artificial ice. And now there's great programs in the United States. I know Canadians sending their players in Vegas, where they're not in Vegas, but in the States, where there's hockey program. There's hockey program all over the place, and in my days, we learned the Jean Beliveau, the Guy Lafleur. They didn't go through programs like that to get skillful, to get their skills. We basically get our skills. You're born with the talent, and then in our days we were a group. We divide ourselves and we play every position. And then when I joined the Montreal Canadiens in 1961, I started with the big team in 67, but I was in the farm teams, the junior Canadiens, and 75% of our practices were scrimmage. Mm-hmm. And as today, I'm not sure you produce better or faster players with the way they practice today, or if they would put all those guys on the ice and making play all the time. I'm not even convinced of that. But the way they produce players is different. It's very different in our times. But Mario Lemieux, you talk about the exceptional talent, and Allan, how Mario Lemieux developed his skills. It's not like they do today. Today they like to do it. It's on the computer. but you cannot. If you take a player's an ordinary player, a very good hockey player, and try to make him a 50-goal scorer, you can't. No matter what you do with him, you can't. Mm-hmm. You can't make Anderson in Montreal a 50-goal scorer.
Yep.
He's fast, he's strong, he's got a good shot, but he can't score. So that skill, it's a gift that he gets, that the nature gave you. So how you develop it, now they have different way to develop it. But give me a team, and I can take the old ways of developing, and I think I'm going to have just as much success.
I love it.
I have no doubt. Serge, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time.
That's it. I
actually kept you a little bit longer than I said I would. And I just want you to know that growing up, I've been in the business now for 30 years, and I love the game. I've loved the game ever since I was 5 years old. And growing up in Montreal, one of the greatest treats I had was watching you during your career and winning the cups, and hearing Danny Gallivan, who I can hear in my head right now with the Savardian Spinorama. You gave so much joy to so many people, and you were such an amazing hockey player and leader, and what you brought to the game off the ice, all of your accomplishments and contributions. I'm honored to have you here as a guest and to spend some time with us and to share your thoughts and opinions and insight. And I just want to thank you.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.